All right, so let's jump right into it. We've been getting some really interesting questions from you guys about these new cost of living measures from the Canadian government
Hmm.
and the timing of it all, right?
Yeah,
Right before a potential election year has got people talking, that's for sure.
for sure.
Especially about this whole GST holiday thing and those $250 checks they're talking about.
Yeah.
We're going to break it all down today, and we'll also look at what the Conservative Party thinks about all this.
It is a bit of a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what's actually help and what's maybe just, well, playing politics.
Exactly. And our main source today is this article from Global News that breaks down all the announcements.
Right.
So this whole GST holiday thing, it's not exactly the usual approach, is it?
No, not really.
So just a really quick reminder for anyone who needs it, the GST, or goods and services tax, is a tax added to, well, pretty much everything you buy.
Most things.
Right.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're temporarily getting rid of the GST on certain items for this holiday.
Yeah, and it's interesting what they chose to include. I mean,
Yeah.
groceries, kids' clothing, diapers. I mean, okay, those all make sense.
Right.
But they've also thrown in restaurant meals, snacks, beer, wine, prepared foods even.
It's a pretty wide range.
Toys and Christmas trees are on the list.
It's like they went through a department store and just picked random things.
Yeah.
This holiday is going to run from December 14th of this year to February 15th, 2025, right in the middle of the holidays.
Right in the middle of all the shopping, yeah.
Which really makes you think about the economic impact of all this. You know,
Sure.
The article mentions it's going to cost an estimated $1.6 billion over those 2 months.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
It's like pumping a ton of money right back into the economy.
It is.
It makes you wonder, is this actually kind of a secret stimulus package all dressed up for Christmas?
Right?
And also, how does this fit in with what the Bank of Canada is doing to control inflation, with all the interest rate hikes?
Yeah.
It seems like they're working against each other in a way. It's definitely a head scratcher.
It is.
And then there are these $250 checks going out in April to Canadians who worked in 2023 and made under $150,000.
Yeah.
Again, the timing is interesting.
If you look at it closely, it seems like these checks are specifically going to people who are really feeling the cost of living crunch,
Right.
but who also happen to be a big group of voters.
Right.
It's hard to ignore that aspect of it.
It's hard to say if it's purely about helping people or if it's part of some kind of election strategy.
Exactly.
Speaking of strategy, let's talk about what the Conservative Party has to say about all this.
Okay.
Pierre Poilievre, their leader, he didn't hold back at all. He called the whole thing a tax trick.
That's pretty strong language.
It is.
Tax trick makes it sound like some kind of manipulation, like
Right.
they're trying to fool people.
Yeah.
It fits with the whole story the conservatives are trying to tell, that the liberal government cares more about looking good than actually solving the problems.
Right, and Poilievre is connecting this directly to the carbon tax. That's right. He's saying this temporary GST break is tiny compared to the permanent quadrupling carbon tax he says is on everything.
Right.
Now, just so everyone is on the same page about the carbon tax, it's basically a fee on fossil fuels to try to cut down on emissions.
Right.
The idea is to make polluting more expensive, so people and companies will choose cleaner options.
It's a complex policy.
Yeah,
And it's caused a lot of debate.
for sure.
The conservatives often say that it hurts lower and middle income Canadians the most,
Right.
especially in rural areas where people really depend on their cars.
Right.
They see it as the government overstepping its boundaries and messing with the free market.
So Poilievre is basically saying this GST break is just a distraction from the real problem,
Right.
which he sees as the carbon tax. But is it really that simple?
Well, the conservatives aren't the only ones with concerns about the carbon tax.
Right.
Even some economists who agree with the idea of carbon pricing say that the way it's being done now might not be the best or the fairest.
They say the money from the carbon tax should go towards helping lower-income households specifically, or they say it should be invested in green infrastructure and technology.
So even people who think we need to do something about climate change have different opinions about how to do it.
Exactly.
It's not just a yes or no kind of issue.
No, it's not.
The article also talks about how other political parties like the NDP and the Bloc Québécois are reacting to this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So what's the NDP saying?
Well, it seems like they're trying to take credit for it, They're saying the Liberals only did this because the NDP pushed them to do it.
Classic political maneuvering.
Yeah.
So what about the block-up?
They're not so sure about it all. They're basically saying these measures are just a way to try and get votes before the election.
Oh, so they're calling it like a pre-election gift bag?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. So there are all these different ways of looking at this. Some people think it's genuine. Hell, some people think it's just a way to get votes.
It's like everyone's looking at the same thing, but seeing something totally different.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
not just the politicians talking about this,
Sure.
though.
Right.
Advocacy groups and businesses have been pretty vocal, too.
Okay, so who are we hearing from?
Well, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, or CFIB, they're kind of cautiously happy about the GST break.
What? Thanks.
Yeah, there's always a but, right? They
Mhm.
say they'd rather have permanent tax relief instead of this temporary fix.
Okay.
It's like they're saying, don't just give us a sugar rush, give us a healthy meal.
Makes sense.
Hmm,
They represent small businesses and they need to know what to expect to be able to grow.
exactly.
What about Restaurants Canada?
Oh, they're thrilled about this GST break.
I bet.
I mean, think about it. The restaurant industry really took a hit during the pandemic.
Oh, for sure.
Lowering the cost of eating out, even for a little while, could bring people back into restaurants and give those businesses a boost they desperately need.
So it's kind of a targeted lifeline for them.
Yeah, you could say that.
But not everyone is buying into this whole idea that it's all about helping people.
Right.
Moms at Work, which is a group that advocates for working mothers, they're saying this is just an election tactic.
Hmm.
They say it doesn't actually address the main problems working mothers face,
Hmm.
like the high cost of childcare.
Yeah, their
Yeah.
point is important.
They make a-
These measures might help a little bit right now, but are they really getting at the root of the problem?
Yeah,
Or are they just a quick fix to make it seem like the government is doing something?
that is the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And to make things even more complicated,
Uh,
there's also the whole debate about how this is all going to affect the economy.
oh, yeah, that's right.
So what are people saying?
Well, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, for example, they're worried about what happens when the holiday ends and prices go back up.
Right. It's like giving someone a free sample at the grocery store. It tastes good,
Yeah.
but it doesn't solve their hunger problem in the long run. But then we have economist Michael Smart, who says this short-term GST break might actually be a better way to stimulate the economy than other things.
Interesting.
Yeah, his argument is that
Oh.
this sudden drop in prices, especially during the holidays when people are shopping anyway, could make everyone spend a lot more.
Hmm.
And that could help all sorts of businesses and get the whole economy moving.
So it's like a trade-off,
Yeah.
immediate help for shoppers versus the possibility of a bigger boost to the economy later on.
It's like choosing between a quick shot of energy and a good, healthy meal.
Yeah, I like that.
And just like with food choices, the best option depends on what people need and what their situation is.
Exactly.
Now, Smart also suggests that giving direct payments to people, especially families with lower incomes, might be a better way to help those who are really struggling.
It's like he's saying, don't just throw seeds everywhere, plant them where they'll actually grow.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It all comes down to finding the right balance between what people need right now and what's best for the long haul. It's like trying to steer a ship through a storm.
Yeah.
You have to keep adjusting your course based on the wind, the waves, and where you're ultimately trying to go.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So in this case, the ship is the Canadian economy, the storm is the cost of living crisis, and the passengers are everyday Canadians just trying to stay afloat.
Exactly.
It's a lot for the government to handle, and there are no easy answers.
You're right about that there aren't. You're
Yeah.
right about that there aren't. It's really tricky.
So just to recap, we have this GST holiday, which is basically a temporary sale on some stuff, but it makes you wonder if it's really going to last and if it's actually doing anything about inflation.
Right. And then there are those $250 checks, which are going to a very specific group of people and could be seen as either direct help or, a way to get people to vote a certain way.
It all depends on how you look at it. And we can't forget about the politics of it all.
Yeah.
The conservatives are calling this whole thing a tax trick and tying it back to their whole argument about the carbon tax and how the liberals are managing the economy.
Right. And at the same time, the NDP is trying to say they made this happen, and the Bloc is saying it's just a way to buy votes.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that politics is always part of these decisions, especially when an election is coming up.
Absolutely.
It's up to each of us to decide if we think these measures are really about helping people or if it's all just a big show.
Right. It's important to be critical and think for yourself.
We've looked at a lot of different opinions today, and it's clear that there's no one right answer when it comes to dealing with the cost of living.
It's just too complicated a problem.
Yeah, it really is, and it affects so many different people in different ways.
It's like a chain reaction, One thing leads to another.
Absolutely.
And in the end, it's up to all of us to stay informed and talk about these issues and make sure the people we elect are doing their jobs.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We need to look beyond the headlines and the sound bites and really understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Don't just take things at face value. Question things, challenge what you hear, and come to your own conclusions.
Right.
This deep dive has given you some things to think about, but don't stop here. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep talking about it.
I think that's the most important thing.
So as we wrap up here, I think the big question we should all be asking ourselves is this.
What is it?
What kind of approach do you think would actually work to solve the cost of living problems Canadians are facing?
That's a really good question, and it's one we all need to think about and talk about and ultimately do something about.
It is, and as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back with another interesting topic soon.
It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
between what we need right now and what's best for the future.
Right.
It's like steering a ship through a storm. You're constantly adjusting course depending on the wind and the waves, but you always got to keep your eye on where you're headed.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So in this case, the ship is the Canadian economy. The storm is this cost of living crisis. And the passengers are just everyday Canadians trying to make ends meet.
Exactly. And there are a lot of people on that ship,
There are.
and they all need different things.
So let's just recap for a sec. We have this GST holiday, which is like a temporary discount on some stuff.
Right.
But is it really sustainable?
Yeah.
Is it really going to do anything about the root causes of inflation?
Good questions.
And then we have these $250 checks going out to a specific group of people.
Right. Could be seen as direct help or maybe a way to win over voters.
Right. It all depends on your perspective.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget about the political side of things. The conservatives are calling this a tax trick and linking it to their whole arguments about the carbon tax and the liberals' economic policies.
Right. The NDP is saying they're the ones who made this happen, and the Bloc is accusing the Liberals of trying to buy votes.
It's a good reminder that politics is always part of the equation, especially with an election coming up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's up to each of us to decide if we think these measures are really about helping Canadians or if it's all just for show.
It's important to think critically and not just believe everything you hear.
We've heard a lot of different opinions today, and I think the main takeaway is that there's no easy answer when it comes to the cost of living.
It's a really complex issue.
It is, and it affects everyone differently.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So what's the answer then?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay informed, to talk about these issues with each other and to hold our elected officials accountable.
Absolutely. We need to look beyond the headlines and the sound bites and really dig into the issues that matter to us.
Exactly. Don't just take things at face value,
Yeah.
Question things, challenge assumptions, and come to your own conclusions.
This deep dive has given you some things to think about, but it doesn't end here.
Right. Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep the conversation going.
I think the biggest question we should all be asking ourselves is this.
Okay, what is it?
What kind of approach do you think would actually work to solve these cost of living problems?
That's a great question, and it's one we all need to think about.
It is.
We need to talk about it, and ultimately we need to do something about it.
We do. That's a great note to end on. So as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great talking about this.
We'll catch you next time with another thought-provoking discussion.